is putting it mildly. Washington facing a new flurry of revelations about its most secretive spy agency. In the past week, we've heard about Angela Merkel's phone being tapped for a decade, spying on the leaders of 34 other nations, 70 million conversations recorded in France at the end of last year by the Americans, 60 million telephone calls over the same period in Spain, all the work of the National Security Agency, as uncovered by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. So now that the steady drip of revelations about the United States' eavesdropping agency has become a full-blown gusher, what's Europe going to do about it? Spying's not new, but cell phones and computers are. Can new rules be agreed upon? Can they be binding? Then there's the question of where it leaves the man who's got final say on the NSA, and more broadly, that $52 billion behemoth known as U.S. intelligence. The White House denies an allegation that Barack Obama was personally briefed in 2010 about spying on the Germans. So will it wash? Today, in the France 24 debate, we're asking, is the NSA out of control? With us from Bloomington, Indiana, retired CIA officer Arthur COYLE teaches at the University of Indiana. Thank you for being with us. Joining us here is Denis GADONNET of FireEye, which is all about protecting companies against cyber attacks. Thanks for being with us. Etienne DROUARD, lawyer specializing in intellectual property, information technology, online, what the list runs long. Online services and data protection. There we go.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for being with us. Lanah KAMMOURIEH, whose work on personal data law has taken her first to Yale and now to the University of Paris. Lanah, former France 24 presenter.
It's good to be back, François.
Nice to have you. And from Geneva, Michel NESTERENKO of the French Research Center on Intelligence. Thank you for joining the conversation. The France 24 debate, where many of you have been joining the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24Debate. I want to start with the latest, not out of Washington, Berlin, Paris, or Madrid, but out of London. British Prime Minister David Cameron telling Parliament that unless the newspapers begin to behave more responsibly, his government is likely to act to stop papers from publishing what he called damaging leaks by Edward Snowden. Lanah KAMMOURIEH, what do you think of that?
I'm sorry, David Cameron calling on the government there to stop.
He's saying that he's told Parliament this Monday that unless the newspapers begin to behave more responsibly, he's calling for legislation to stop them from publishing what he calls damaging leaks.
I think it's the classical debate between the right of the public to know what's happening and to be sure that their rights are enforced, and the interests of states to be able to do what is necessary to protect their national security. I am not sure from the revelations we've seen since the summer that the extent of the spying that's going on is necessary strictly to protect the interests of national security. I think the doubt that's being raised here is whether more information than necessary is being harvested, whether ordinary citizens are having their personal data online collected in this dragnet, and dragnet surveillance is a real problem.
Michel NESTERENKO, do you agree with David Cameron that newspapers like The Guardian have gone too far?
Yes, totally. This is not only illegal under US law, but it's also immoral and totally undemocratic. And the use of it is under question today, whether it was useful at all. So the end result is negative.
I'm sorry, so you're saying that newspapers like The Guardian should be prosecuted, or that it's the NSA that's in the wrong?
No, I'm saying that the NSA is totally in the wrong, acting illegally under US law, acting immorally according to international way of doing things, and acting totally in an undemocratic fashion. And if the Prime Minister of England is following the lead of the NSA, then I would say that, why is he taking such a big political risk since his population does not agree with him?
Arthur COYLE, your thoughts?
Well, what the NSA has been doing is not illegal under U.S. law.
I am rather skeptical when a spokesman for President Obama says he did not know of such actions. For the NSA or any of the intelligence organizations to carry out an activity with such sensitivity, this would have been done only under the directions of the president, whoever it was at that time. And the last commentator, everyone's entitled to their own view, but not their own facts. I didn't know there was a standard for moral behavior under international law. Every country does what it thinks is its own interests.
All's fair? Do you agree with that, Etienne Drouard?
I would say that there are maybe two categories of population. First ones, those having a political power, being with their phone recorded, etc., which is a matter of sovereignty, of foreign policy, geopolitics, etc. The other category deals with many millions of people, for which you get to obtain some information from private service providers, which are located in the US. And you cannot ask these giants to filter the information before providing it to the NSA. The filter will be done by the NSA. But first you have to harvest everything, and then you define the purpose of your investigations. This is another category of population, and this is maybe outside of the scope of national security, which is quite wider than in other countries. National security is not only a matter of security, but also a matter of, it has been changed in 1978, where the first changing was about protecting the US economy, which is not exactly the definition that we have in Europe. And this is why when we see this mass of data collected, we could not only think of fighting against terrorism, but also thinking about economic warfare or things like that.
So Denis GADONNET, we're saying it's about stopping terrorists, but is it in fact about having a competitive edge of getting a big of trolling for consumer behaviors and things like this, and getting an edge on the competition in an economic war rather than a war on terror, as it was called?
Correct. So we are speaking about World War C as a cyber. In fact, it's for everybody is paying everybody. So we have identified at FireEye 184 countries that hosts what we call command and control. It's server that collect data. So imagine it's 42% of increase since 2010. So it's huge. It's not only on the part of the world, everybody is collaborate with this kind of cyber espionage, cyber criminality, cyber activism. And it's not a question of one government. Everybody is doing that. Just to telling you some numbers, the US government estimate that in 2012, the data left exfiltration costs something like $250 billion. And in cyber criminality, it costs something like $114 billion. That's huge. So we have to protect. Europe needs to protect. We need to set up very quickly a law against data exfiltrations, against protect our intellectual property. That's the vital.
So is what you're saying that the outrage in Europe is because we're behind? Basically.
We are behind. We are attacked. It's a question of communication, in fact. This cyber attack existing since a long time right now. We identify something like 1974, the first attack like that, the cyber attack. So at that time it was not the name, but right now this is the case. And it's a question really of communication. We see a lot of countries, of states that's paying everybody,
all right.
As mentioned before.
Now, you guys work on this stuff all day. You think about it at night when you sleep. The general public, though, a lot of people are shocked. And the United States has had its third ambassador in less than a week called in by a host country. After Berlin and Paris, this time it was Madrid.
Well, as always, we only learn about what's going on after it's happened. That's how it is with American intelligence. They're always ahead of us.
It's a disgrace that they're spying on governments and their presidents, advisors and ministers. We will see what happens, but to me this is a very serious violation.
And in Berlin, they're particularly angry. Now, the Interior Minister has even said this Monday that it's thanks to the NSA listening posts inside of Germany that the NSA did its snooping there. We have more on this story now from Nicholas Rushworth.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel loves her mobile phone and is known to text colleagues across the Bundestag frequently. However, that phone has now become the centre of a diplomatic and media storm. Der Spiegel says Das Nest, a spying office in the US Embassy in Berlin, was monitoring her. Another German paper, Bild, headlined that the US President Barack Obama knew Merkel was being spied on. The paper says he was told in 2010 and didn't stop it. The NSA, however, denies its director ever discussed the operation with Obama. Those allegations will be a topic for discussion when German intelligence officials go to Washington this week for clarification. Berlin wants a no-spy deal by the year's end, pointing out that if the eavesdropping is confirmed, it's illegal. Former US Vice President Dick Cheney, speaking on US TV, acknowledged Washington's taking a hit yet again from former CIA operative Edward Snowden.
I think the unfortunate aspect of it is that Mr. Snowden has, in fact, divulged a lot of information which is damaging to the United States.
The headline here reports Obama saying to Merkel, "I knew nothing." Has he lied as well as spied on the German Chancellor then? Opposition German politicians are calling for a full parliamentary investigation into US surveillance. Edward Snowden could be called as a witness.
Jean Arthur Coyle, you said earlier that you were dubious as to whether or not Barack Obama is correct when his spokesman says that he didn't know and that he was not privy to a conversation. How do you feel? Do you feel for the German Interior Minister who made a trip to Washington back in July, and now we have these further revelations? It's humiliating for the Germans, isn't it?
Well, presidents and diplomats tell little white lies to each other all the time for appearance's sake. It's rather expected that Obama has to say, "Oh, I didn't know about this," just as when French intelligence has been caught in years past spying on American companies, a French president would have to say, "I had no idea, I'm shocked, there's gambling going on here." The fact that the U.S. was listening to Chancellor Merkel's phone, if that's true, I think that's fine. What makes the Germans think that we have such a special bond that they are exempt from us wanting to know what's really going on in their foreign policy? I know that sounds cynical, but there are a lot of people still alive in America who fought in World War II and who don't think of Germany as our best ally in the entire world.
But what kind of information are you looking for when you listen in on the phone conversation of the German Chancellor?
If she's trading schnitzel recipes with President Hollande, we don't really care. If she's having a conversation with President Putin about what Germany and Russia might decide to do concerning Syria, yes, we'd probably really like to know that. Could I talk about, just quickly, about, the 70 million phone records in Spain and in France? The purpose of those, it's the toll data. It's the who called who. The reason that's important is if the NSA finds that some terrorist in Pakistan has called some number in Madrid, we'd probably like to know who that was to, and we might like to know what other numbers then did he phone elsewhere in Spain or in France.
Now, in the French press over the weekend, there was an entirely different explanation. Those calls made at the end of the year, a time of the year when you wish everybody a Happy New Year or Merry Christmas or whatever, and the idea was to establish who's friends with who over not the short term, but the long term, and to profile people for all sorts of purposes. Your thoughts on that?
There's a lot of people who think they understand what signals intelligence is about. But if you're going to track down who's calling who, you have to keep those records month after month after month. Maybe you never use them. Maybe 2 years from now, you'll want to go back and find out who was calling whom. In a perfect world, this wouldn't be going on. I agree with that. But that same perfect world would have no terrorists, would have no wars, would have no drug smugglers.
All right, we have on Twitter Nimli who's saying, why are European leaders acting like they don't do the same? Michel NESTERENKO.
Yeah, I think we're dealing with a magnitude of spying which boggles the imagination. The Cold War spying was carefully targeted. This is not targeted. The Americans today, or the American intelligence community, considers all Americans as terrorists, consider all Europeans as terrorists, in the same fashion that the Senator Kennedy could not get into an airplane because he had an Irish name and he was considered a terrorist. So for months, he couldn't get on an airplane. So, you know, we have a problem here in the vision of the American intelligence community.
Lanah KAMMOURIEH.
Can I pick up on something Mr. Coyle and Mr. NESTERENKO said? Mr. Coyle was saying this is no big news. We know that world leaders spy on one another, that governments spy on officials of even allied countries, and that's fair. International law actually is quite tolerant of this. It doesn't outright ban spying at all. It can be a useful tool in the conduct of international relations. What is different here, and I think this is what Mr. NESTERENKO is saying, is the amplitude of the surveillance for regular people who do not hold public office, who do not engage in terrorist activities, and who still find their data harvested in this way. It poses the question of what kind of society we want to live in, and the balance between liberty and security. Like, until where, how badly do you want security? How many personal freedoms will you give up for it?
All right, and we're going to pick up on that point when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.